Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders Game Day Edition. I appreciate everybody being in here. As always, we got our man, Cody Nagel, 24/7 National Desk, is along with Alec Busse, who covers Iowa State for 24/7. Today, we're talking a little bit different stuff today. I mean, we're talking about the conference. Is it better or worse than what people anticipated, it was going to be before the season started? I know we're not deep into conference play, but there's some opinions out there that are being formed about the Big 12 right now. Second is Colorado. Do they deserve more credit? Should they be considered a player to be able to win this conference after their big win over UCF on the road this past weekend? And then also talking about who is the best quarterback in this conference. I know Shedeur Sanders gets a ton of the headlines, and justifiably so, but is he the actual best quarterback in this conference? We're going to take a deep dive into that. As always, we're going to do our lock of the week, upset of the week, and then pick the featured game of the week. So all that and more. Before we get started, remember, as always, like, follow, subscribe, continue to hit those comments and hit the notification bell so you know exactly when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. Having said all that, Alec, Cody, how are you guys doing this afternoon?
Doing pretty
Doing
good.
Great
on the show. Obviously, the Big 12 is an absolute mess, so let's sort through it, guys.
Oh, man. I mean, look, I know that the conference every year is pretty much unpredictable, but you usually have a team that kind of stands out and is like, you know what, they're good. They're going to win the conference. It is what it is. We thought it was Utah. We thought after they just smacked around Oklahoma State that we thought, okay, here it is. Utah's it. They come home, they play Arizona, and the exact same thing happens to them. Arizona just physically whipped them. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'll start with you, Cody. Is the Big 12, is it as good as what people thought it was going to be? Now, I get it that they said, okay, it's the third best conference here, but is it worse at this point in time, or is it just super competitive?
Yeah, I mean, it's worse than I thought it was going to be. And I think it's because those top 5 teams from the preseason poll, they've all got at least one loss right now. I mean, Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, which has 2, and then Kansas, which has 4, and its only win is against Lindenwood, who I didn't even know that was an actual school before this year.
Man, that's like 15 minutes from my hometown. You better watch it.
Okay, well,
Lions.
I'd never heard of them. Anyways, yes, I think the Big 12 is worse than I thought it would be, but I think it's mainly because that top group that I mentioned is closer to that middle and bottom tier. There's not that separation that we were all expecting. Like you said, like everyone thought Utah was going to be this dominant team in the conference this year. So yeah, I think from that perspective, it is. If we're talking about how the Big 12 stacks up against, the rest of the Power 4, I really don't see how this conference right now gets 2 teams in the playoff just because of how it's trending with, BYU is going to run into a buzzsaw here eventually. Iowa State, I think they can continue it maybe till like late November until they play their toughest games. But I just don't see how you can make the argument with how it's trending that they're going to get 2 teams in the playoff.
I would agree with Cody for a lot of those same reasons, that I don't think it's as good as people in Big 12 circles were hoping that it could be. And I think one of the reasons you're seeing that is you don't have the dominant program that you've had in the past with Texas and Oklahoma from a pure talent perspective, right? Like those schools every weekend. And I know Texas, wasn't great for the last decade or better part of a decade that they were in the Big 12, but they still had the talent every single weekend that you could kind of bank on them at least being in the game. And Oklahoma was so good for that entire decade. I think it was 6 or 7 Big 12 titles within those 10 years. You don't have that anymore. And because of that, you've got a whole bunch of teams that are equally built from a talent perspective. And it becomes impossible to predict who's going to be really good and who's not. It becomes a fool's errand in a certain sense. And I think, in a certain sense, we came on here last week and we were all saying, all right, well, Utah's the undisputed favorite in the league. And, Isaac Wilson played okay at Oklahoma State, didn't light it up, but then he lays a huge stinker against Arizona and they lose 23-10. But I wouldn't even say like he was the reason they lost to Arizona. To me, they lost to Arizona because they had like 85 rushing yards against the Wildcats and just got out physical, which is something that you never say about Utah teams under Kyle Whittingham. But yeah, I agree. I think West Virginia being an underachiever at this point, I think you can make a case that Kansas has maybe underachieved more than anyone in the entire country to this point, with their only win being against an FCS opponent. And you have had some of the upper middle, maybe bottom tier teams that we thought play above their level. I think Colorado is one of those teams right now with the way they looked against UCF. I would throw UCF in the category of teams that have underachieved at this point too, that Cody didn't mention. I think Arizona State has maybe overachieved a little bit, but they were on a bye last weekend. And how impressive is that Mississippi State win that they have? I'm not trying to take anything away from ASU and what they accomplished, but like Mississippi State's not good. I would argue that Arizona State's best win is on the road at Arizona State. So, or excuse me, it's on the road at Texas State. I do agree with Cody that I think the conference is going to struggle to get two teams into the CFP. And to me, that was always going to be a struggle for them. And the path, in my opinion, is probably, Iowa State's undefeated, hoping that they can run the table all the way to their last 2 weeks of the regular season, maybe split those two games against Utah and Kansas State, get into the Big 12 title game with an 11-1 regular season record. Maybe you lose in the Big 12 title game and they're 11-2, and you're like, all right, like that team is 11-2, and they lost to the same team twice. If it's Utah or K-State that wins the Big 12, that's just a bad matchup for them. But we can find a way to get that second Big 12 team in there as an at-large. But man, it seems like it's going to be an uphill battle for the Big 12 to get two teams to me.
Yeah, the reason being is, we can make fun of the ACC all day, but if Miami keeps winning, Clemson looks like they're pretty good now. I mean, that game against Georgia may have been Georgia's just that much better, but it seems like an outlier because they fixed whatever their issue might be. The ACC has a better opportunity to get two teams in than the Big 12 at this point. Now, again, a lot of football still left to be played, so a lot's going to happen. But I think both of you are right. It's just going to be tough. I just can't get over. Look, I was all in on Kansas. I just don't understand it. I can't figure it out. We talked last week about maybe it's the offensive coordinator. Now their defense is falling apart the last couple of weeks, not being able to stop people when you need to be able to stop them. I just don't know what's going on there. They have too much talent, and it is talent. And if we say that Lance Leipold is a good coach, I mentioned this on a show earlier that I did in the week, Alec, is that if you made a mistake at the offensive coordinator position, the one thing about mistakes is you make it worse if you live in the mistake. At some point, you have to say, you know what, this isn't working. I've got to change something here. We saw it at Arizona. Arizona said, you know what, we're not moving the ball the way we need to be moving the ball. And they quietly made a offensive play caller change. And maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. But I know they won a big-time game on the road after they did that. At some point, Kansas has got to do the same thing here. I don't want to just pick on Kansas because, again, there's several teams that are underachieving. I just think it's true. I think they're the biggest underachiever in the country right now.
Yeah, and to me, they've tried to do different things. Like Jeff Grimes has gone up and down from the field to the booth. Like they've tried different things, but how much of a change is that really for them?
Nothing.
I think there was a lot of people who thought that losing Andy Kotelnicki could be huge for them, and I think it's proven to be a huge deflection for them, especially when you look at how good Penn State is. Like Penn State's a no doubt top 10 team in the country right now, and I read something last night on ESPN that like he's one of the coordinators who could be in line to be hired as head coach. Like I think it's pretty safe to say Jeff Grimes is not in that position right now, without being too disrespectful to Jeff Grimes. I think that you mentioned the talent aspect of it be like, to me, a head coach's job, 70% of it is talent acquisition. And, I think Lance Leipold has done a good job with the talent that he inherited at KU, but how much has he really upgraded the floor of it? Maybe a little bit here and there, but it's not like KU is, in the top 50 or top 40 of our 24/7 team talent composite rankings. I don't think, Cody, you may know those rankings better off the top of your head than I do. having been on the national team a little bit longer. But yeah, I think that, Grimes, it's hard to make that kind of change though. And they're not on a bye week this week. KU isn't, so that makes it a little bit difficult. At least I don't think KU's on a bye this weekend. Yeah, they're at Arizona State. So like that makes it difficult too, right? Like when you're on a bye, it gives you another week to kind of work those things out. They're not gifted that situation yet.
Mm-mm.
I think they're going to struggle. Like we've said, they're going to really struggle to get two teams in the playoff. But I think the biggest thing that they kind of need to play into, as far as like promoting or trying to create, some sort of excitement around the conference, is the parity. I mean, this is going to be one of the most competitive conference races in the country coming down to it. I mean, there's a legit chance that there's like a 3-loss team that gets into Arlington. And I think that's just something you got to kind of play into is, okay, we don't have that dominant level that like the ACC or the SEC has at the top, but there's so much more parity in this conference that it's going to make the games that much more exciting. There's not going to be a ton of blowouts. You could have an Oklahoma State or a Utah, being in a closer game against somebody that's, towards the bottom of the conference. But
Right.
yeah, I just think there's got to be something there that you got to play into as far as trying to keep relevance on the national scale.
Well, and the one thing that would drive, I guess, if we want to say it's driving maybe the Big Ten, the SEC, and everybody crazy, let a 3-loss team win the Big 12. They're going to get a home game, and then let them win a game. That would absolutely drive everybody bonkers, because then they're going to say, well, they shouldn't even deserve to get in, but then they end up winning a game, which for the Big 12, I think that's what you need to do.
Well, they wouldn't get a home game.
What's that?
They wouldn't get a home game.
They would. Maybe a top 4.
No, the top 4 doesn't get home games.
That's the bye, and then that's at the neutral site, I think.
It'll be one of the New Year's 6 home games.
That's right.
So they won't get a home game, and they'll play more than likely, at least right now, we would assume, the 5 seed, assuming that team beats whatever G5 team
whoever it is,
the 12 seed.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. They don't get a home game. Well, either way, if they go and win a game, that would drive them absolutely insane. But like we've talked about before, yeah, they definitely have to, because they don't get the opportunities in the non-conference, which I think they have to start taking advantage of that. But if they go win a game, maybe that quiets the crowd about what the Big 12 is. But as of right now, fellas, it's not as good as what I think like a lot of us anticipated it would be. And maybe we didn't think it was going to be great, but as of right this second, there's a lot of football left, so we can't just throw the towel in, but it's just not as good right now as what everybody thought it was going to be.
What would help? Sorry, what would help this week is if UCF went on the road and like beat the crap out of Florida or something.
Yes.
Like I know Florida's not the best like record. They've got a really tough schedule, but there's still a lot of talent on that team. Mm-hmm. So if UCF was to go on the road and win that one somehow, I think that would definitely help a little bit of the perception of the Big 12.
I think what would help the Big 12 more than anything is Iowa State finding a way to run the table to like mid-October, end of October, be undefeated. And I think that's on the table for them if you look at their upcoming schedule.
Yeah, and because they're going to be ranked high enough and people will start paying more attention to them. You're absolutely right, Alec. And you're right, Cody. Because 3 weeks ago, if we were talking about this game, I think everybody's picking UCF to go to Florida and win. But now it's like, well, I don't know. So, but you're right. Because the perception is it's still Florida, but Florida's not very good. And people don't think Florida's very good, but they're still in the SEC. If UCF can go there and win, that's going to mean a heck of a lot. I've heard a lot of chatter that UCF was looking past Colorado to Florida. That's kind of why they fell on their face. Maybe that's the truth. I don't know. But yeah, it's just not sure you can do that with the talent level that you actually have. And speaking of Colorado, how big a win was that, Alec, going to UCF? Are we talking about UCF? And then you had mentioned it, not sure how good they were. And Colorado whips them. I mean, they did. They beat them up. If you would have told me that UCF is only going to outrush Colorado by 49 yards in a football game, I would have laughed right in your face. Well, that happened. Well, if that was going to happen, you would think that UCF's going to get beat. Well, they did. Couldn't believe what I saw. A lot of 4 turnovers is a ton. But I don't know. Colorado looks to be a little bit better. Are they a serious contender right now?
I would describe that win as the best win of Deion Sanders' tenure at Colorado in 2 years. And I would honestly say that kind of without a doubt, in my opinion. I say that pretty confidently. They were a 2-touchdown underdog, about a 2-touchdown underdog going into that game. And I would give a lot of credit to Colorado just in the way that they've responded since losing to Nebraska back in week 2. Remember, they lost 28-10. I believe they were down 28-0 at halftime on the road at Nebraska in week 2. And since then, they've won 3 games in a row. They handled Colorado State. They made the plays they needed to in key moments against Baylor to beat Baylor and Boulder. And then they go on the road and they get a key win against UCF. And they're now all of a sudden 4-1 heading into October with a bye week this week. I think that Colorado has positioned themselves to at least be in the conversation, Cody, of teams who you can't write off as a Big 12 contender. And I think I would put my hand up and I would say I may have written Arizona off after they lost to Kansas State on that Friday night of week 3 or week 4. And I think Arizona has now written themselves back into that contending tier. I don't know if I've ever fully considered Colorado a no doubt contender. I kind of thought they were on the threshold of that entering the season, where there was 8 or 9 teams I thought could find a way to win the Big 12 or at least play for the Big 12 title. I thought Colorado was right there on the threshold of it. And now I think that they've written themselves into that category of teams that, probably not a favorite, but they're definitely contending for it, I would say, Cody.
Yeah, I think it's kind of all about perception and what you thought the expectations were for Colorado coming into the season, kind of like you mentioned. I mean, I had them right. This might be a little low than some people, but I had them right at like 5 or 6 wins. I mean, so I'd give them plenty of credit for, exceeding expectations up to this point. I mean, I think the reason why so many people don't want to give them credit is because, think of when they got off to that start last year, think of the crazy things that people were saying, like, oh, they're gonna win the Pac-12, they're gonna go to the playoff, they're gonna compete for national championship, because they had beaten what turned out to be a really bad TCU team and again a really bad Nebraska team. So yeah, I think that kind of led to some pretty crazy perceptions or expectations for them. And I think Deion kind of played a part in that too. Some of the things that he said, maybe they were taken out of context, but he wasn't doing anything to temper the hype or anything like that. But I mean, I'm still not convinced that Colorado can be a legit contender in the Big 12 this year. I think that they're obviously going to make a bowl game. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago how important these past 2 games were for them to get to that point. But yeah, I just can't feel confident in saying that they're going to be in the mix come November, just because of the issues that they have still in the run game. It's still not great. And, the defense is still giving up a lot of yards. So I want to see more, what am I trying to say? Try to get better in those areas for them to be in the mix.
And I know this game is in 2 weeks when they play K-State in Boulder. But if I was a Colorado fan, the way that we played against UCF would maybe inspire confidence for me against Kansas State, because I think K-State's offense is built fairly similarly to UCF's, with a running quarterback, 2 backs who are capable of running, a quarterback who isn't the most gifted throwing the football. We've seen Avery Johnson have success. We've seen KJ Jefferson have success throwing, but they've also had down moments and really bad head-scratching interceptions. And I thought Colorado's defensive line and their edge rushers played great at the mesh point on a lot of those read option plays. And I think K-State's going to have to continue to lean into those, because we've seen Avery Johnson struggle as a drop back passer at times this year. So, I think Colorado has good athletes on the defensive line. It's certainly better than it was a year ago. I remember saying that earlier this season on another show with you, B, that I think that their defensive front is a lot better than people think it is. I think they proved that with the way they played against UCF. So, I think K-State could certainly roll them in Boulder, but I also think that Colorado has athletes up front and obviously outside and at the skill position talent to make that a game. And K-State's first experience with after dark kickoffs didn't go the greatest. So
did not go the greatest.
Be on the lookout.
Road game
did not go the greatest in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't gone the greatest. Look, here's the thing about Colorado for me is I think we have to stop saying, because this was kind of the perception before last week, that well, they haven't beaten anybody. They haven't beaten anybody. We have to stop saying that everybody's not good because Colorado beats them. Okay. At some point, we got to give them at least a little bit of credit for doing it, because I don't think there's anybody anywhere that knows anything about football that thought that Colorado was going to be able to keep UCF from running for under 200 yards. I don't think that anybody thought that. Well, they did. Now, you could say 4 turnovers. Well, Colorado forced those turnovers, and that's what you do. You take advantage, so you have to give them the credit that they have earned. I'm kind of leaning in your boat, though, Cody. I'm just not sure I'm there yet on wanting to say that they can win the conference. What I will say this, and you guys can chime in and agree or disagree, is I know all the fanfare last year. I know they were ranked last year, but you guys know football. You saw what Colorado actually was. You knew their offensive line and defensive line was absolute terrible, and then eventually it was going to fall apart. I think this game, and I know people will say, well, you went to K-State, you're a homer. I think this game is the biggest game in Deion Sanders' tenure at Colorado coming up next week. I don't think there's any doubt that it is. You can talk about some of the game, the USC game last year. Nobody thought Colorado was going to win this game. There's a lot of people that think they can beat K-State. And again, the game's at home. Colorado is better. I just think that it's the biggest game in their tenure, or in Deion Sanders' tenure there.
Anyone have a betting line on that? An early betting line? Has anyone seen it?
I have not.
I haven't either.
I have not.
I just pulled up the ESPN FPI for it, and it gives K-State a 52.3% chance to win. So I'm guessing it's going to be a line that's less than 4.5, 5.5.
Absolutely.
FanDuel's got it K-State minus 5.5.
I should be an odds maker. I nailed it. I said 4.5, 5.5. Damn, I should go to Vegas.
But that's the thing with Colorado's schedule, though, is their toughest games. But their toughest games are in Boulder.
Yes.
The K-State one, the Utah one, Oklahoma State, which I know they're not what we thought they were going to be. But, I mean, those 3 games are the toughest ones they've got. I guess they go to Arizona. But, I mean, those top-tier teams, they get at home. So, I mean, maybe they can get on a roll here and get something going. But, I just worry about what was their biggest issue last year. It was depth in the second half of the season. They couldn't keep pace or keep up with anyone. So, at what point does that come to bite them again? But I mean, they've obviously made a lot of improvements, and they've looked a lot better in a lot of areas, this season compared to last season. But yeah, I'm with you, B. I just can't feel confident in saying that they're going to be in the mix come November.
No, not yet. Moving on here. Look, we talked about Colorado. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders plays for Colorado. Great quarterback. But there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in this conference. And I'll start with you, Cody. Who do you think is the best quarterback right now? Let me preface this, and I'm going to say this first so you guys don't have to say it and people can just be mad at me. Numbers sometimes do lie, people, okay? Because Alan Bowman is 3rd in the league in passing yards, okay? And we've seen him the last 2 weeks. I'm sorry. Don't tell me he's the 3rd best quarterback based on yard. I'm sorry. Those could have been the most empty stats that I think I've ever seen a quarterback have last week. 364 yards passing. It just unbelievable. So like I said, I'll say it so you guys don't have to say it. Sometimes those numbers lie, but I'll go ahead, Cody. Who do you believe right now, anyway, is the best quarterback right now in the Big 12 Conference?
Yeah, I think it has to be Shedeur Sanders. I would go Shedeur. I'll just kind of list my top 3 that I put together here. I put Shedeur number 1. I put Avery Johnson number 2 just because of his dual threat ability. And then I actually put Brandon Sorsby at number 3. I think with Shedeur, you got to think like what he's putting up with. The offensive line is still not great. He's got 0 run game to work with. And so the fact that, he's still able to kind of pick apart defenses when they know what's coming, I think says a lot about, his talent and being able to read defenses. But yeah, I would have to go with Shedeur number 1, just because of what's around him.
I would also put Shedeur number 1. And I think there's a real case to be made that he's still a potential first-round NFL quarterback. Was listening to a podcast before coming on here. They did mention him among potential QB1 candidates. It seems like Jalen Milroe has kind of risen up that list after his strong play against Georgia last weekend. But to me, I would put Shedeur Sanders number one. Someone I didn't expect to say, only two names I didn't expect to say. Josh Hoover at TCU has played really well, has put up a lot of impressive numbers, 14 touchdowns on the year, averaging close to 9 yards per completion on the season. That's pretty impressive as well. I agree with Cody's shout out of Brendan Sorsby, the Indiana transfer, has played well, probably exceeded expectations. And then I think you've got a group of guys that includes, Avery Johnson, Rocco Becht, Noah Fafita, maybe Garrett Green, guys who can be big playmakers for their teams. Maybe Baron Morton goes into this group as well with the talent and explosiveness that the Texas Tech offense can produce, that are all kind of in that conversation as well. But yeah, for me, it's Shedeur number one without a question.
Yeah, I like Shedeur as the top quarterback because, again, and basically I have Shedeur 1, I have Josh Hoover 2, and Brendan Sorsby, I guess 2A, 2B. I kind of have them tied. But I go back to what you said, Cody. For all three of them, for me, the reason that I have them is because everybody knows what they're doing. And for instance, like Colorado, you can say they ran the ball a little bit better, and they did. You got to give them credit. But they don't really run the football. And TCU and Cincinnati absolutely don't run the football. And everybody knows that they're throwing the ball, and yet they're still able to throw for that many yards. You got to give them credit for being able to do that. Shedeur's the case. It's like his line, you don't know from which game to game if his line's going to protect him or not. So it's tricky. Brendan Sorsby, I really underrated him to start the season because I saw him at Indiana, and he was not this guy. He was absolutely not this guy. He had some talent, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't even close to what this guy is that he's how he's playing right now. So you got to give him a ton of credit for being able to do it. And it's weird because, like I said, Cincinnati wants to run the football. Scott Satterfield, they want to run it. That's his offense, and they can't do it. So he's out there throwing it. Good for him. And then TCU, look, Josh Hoover, I get it. They're behind in a lot of games. Having to play catch up, they get these leads, but I can't take away what he's doing. I really can't. But I think Shedeur is the best quarterback in this conference. And I'm sorry, Oklahoma State fans, I get it. You're going to be mad at me, but you just can't. I mean, you know what you're seeing out of Alan Bowman. You know, we watched it on Saturday when Mike Gundy said, you know what, we're going to just start throwing the football. I know Ollie Gordon's got 72 yards in the first quarter. We're going to throw it and put it in his hands, and he literally could not deliver. That was bad.
No, I think Oklahoma State fans are just as frustrated with Alan Bowman as as anyone. I mean, I don't know what it is. He's not getting a ton of pressure. The offensive line's protecting him a decent amount. I don't think he's been sacked that many times, so it's not like that's an issue. I just think he's an average quarterback. I mean, there's a reason he's been around for as long as he has, and the reason he's transferred as many times as he has is, I mean, I just think he's an average quarterback, and when you don't have that strong run game that's going like they had last year, there's really not much of a balance there for him to lean on. So, yeah, I don't think you're going to offend any Oklahoma State fans by calling Alan Bowman, bad, I guess.
I would also just say that he hasn't been put in a position to be successful by his teammates and the coaching staff through the last 2 weeks, more specifically the coaching staff, because they just haven't looked prepared for their two games. If they're going to fall behind by multiple scores and you need to rely on Bowman to throw you back into a game, it's not his talent. That's not his skill set. He's not capable of doing that for them. And I think that you combine those things, and now you're starting to see some of his weaknesses come together because you combine having to come back in games and you're not running the ball like you did last season. It becomes really difficult for a quarterback like Alan Bowman.
Yeah, my thing with the game last week against K-State, like we said, Ollie Gordon got off and was just a monster in the first quarter, just an absolute monster. And then people are saying, well, he got hurt. And my thing was, look, if he was hurt, then why was he still in the game? And they kept giving him the ball periodically. Well, if the guy's actually hurt, don't you sit him out? I don't know. That's just me. If a guy's out there and able to get the ball every now and then either you play him and you run him or you don't. It's not, well, we're going to run him here. We're going to set him out for 8 plays and do play action and then run them. It was almost like they decided to use them as a decoy. Alec, you're right. That's not Alan Bowman's skill set to lead a comeback in a game like that. I don't know. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. But more importantly, I didn't like he's hurt. No, I don't want to hear that Ollie Gordon's hurt, because if a guy's really that hurt, then he has to sit out, doesn't he? None of that made sense to me. It was weird. It was just weird.
No, I also think Oklahoma State just doesn't know what it's doing offensively. I think it's just trying to figure out a way to get Ollie Gordon going, and it's not really working. And then when it does, then their defense lets them down, and they're down a few scores, and they're having to play catch-ups. Now they're throwing the ball more.
Right.
I think it's really a big mess there, and I kind of worry for what's coming next.
Oof, trouble, especially from a team that a lot of people thought was supposed to be really good. Still a lot of football left. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of football left to be played, but we'll see how it goes. So we're going to move on here to our upset of the week. Now, look, I'm going to demand from you two this week that you cannot both pick the same teams on both of these, okay? I'm putting my foot down. We're not doing that this week. So I will start with you, Alec. Who do you have on upset alert? I mean, technically, is it really an upset alert in the Big 12 Conference this year? I don't know that it really is outside of a few games, but who do you have on upset alert this week?
Cody, I don't know where you're going to go with this. Hopefully this one's not yours. There's two that I identified. I'll go West Virginia at Oklahoma State -4.5. I don't really know how Oklahoma State can be a favorite after what they've done the last 2 weeks. I don't know why, but I can't sell all of the West Virginia stock that I had before the season. You know, they didn't quit, which I think would have been really easy for them to do after the way they played against Penn State, the way they lost against Pitt in a rivalry game. They didn't quit when they played KU, despite trailing by 11 with less than 5 minutes to go about. To me, that's kind of inspiring. We've also seen Oklahoma State struggle to defend the run. I still believe in C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White. I think Garrett Green can be a good playmaker with his legs at quarterback. So I'll take West Virginia +4.5. Cody, can I just guess where your pivot's going to be to? Because I could tell by the reaction that was your pick.
Well, that was my pick, and now I'm scrambling to look at the lines. I should have had a backup one, knowing that you were going to pick the same one.
My other one was Texas Tech at Arizona, who's -5.5.
Yeah, I'd like Arizona in that one too. Let's see.
I'll give you a second, Cody, to look at it, and I'll go.
Okay.
I am going to go with Kansas. I'm going to say I'm doing it. I'm saying Kansas. They haven't thrown in the towel. It's on the road at Arizona State, -3. But you're at home, -3. That's basically a pick'em game. So I'm going Kansas. I say they've got something left. One last hurrah to try to save their season. Give me Kansas this week.
Well, that was my other one, so this is not going well. I'm going to go back to West Virginia, Oklahoma State for a sec. I just don't have any more trust that Gundy's going to just suddenly fix the offensive issues on both sides, I guess, offense and defense, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. But there's just no consistency on offense. The defense is getting gashed on the ground. And what does West Virginia have? Talented running backs and a mobile quarterback, which really beat up Oklahoma State last week. So I think, kind of like what Alec was saying, I think West Virginia is kind of the easy pick here as far as an upset alert. But yeah, I would also go to Kansas, Arizona State, kind of like what you mentioned too, B.
Yeah, I just think at some point, I don't know. I say that at some point. I've been saying that the last 3 weeks. That talent is going to rule the day, or they're going to get it figured out. This coaching is going to get it figured out, but it hasn't yet. So we'll see. Look, we got a lock of the week. I guess everybody could say TCU over Houston if you want to, but I'm not going to let you do that. Houston hasn't even scored a point in the last 2 games. So I don't know. They got a lot going on at Houston right now. Alec, I basically said on my recap show on Monday that Iowa State kind of used it as an away scrimmage. And the game was over after it was 3-0. I was like, man, this stuff. And I watched some of them. Like Houston's offense, they can't do anything. And now, don't get me wrong, Iowa State's defense is really good, but heck, you're missing 100 linebackers, and still they can't do anything. So, who do you have for your lock of the week?
I'm gonna go Florida -1 against UCF.
Ooh,
I don't really think the Florida team's very good. Their personnel isn't very good. I think that Billy Napier deserves a lot of blame for losing his most talented running back, his most talented pass rusher in the portal, and not replacing them in the offseason. But they rolled past Mississippi State fairly easily. I think that they just have more talent up front in the trenches than UCF does. So I'll lean Florida. The game's also in the Swamp. I think that favors Florida, and they only have to win by 1. So if they win, I hit that. So I'll take the easy out there. I'll do the Gator chomp.
Gotcha.
I'm going to go to Iowa State -11.5 against Baylor. I know that's a lot of points in a conference game, but I just think the way that Iowa State's been able to play this season, kind of controlling games. I think they held Houston to, 1 of 8 on third down last week.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And Baylor
1 of 9 maybe.
Yeah, and Baylor's like 10 of their last 30 on third down. So I think Iowa State will be able to kind of keep the ball in its hands. And I know Baylor made it interesting late last week against BYU, but I mean, they were really on quit watch there for the first quarter when they got down 28-0 or 21-0, whatever it was. But yeah, I know it's a lot of points, but I just think the way that Iowa State kind of matches up against Baylor, I'm going to take them as my lock of the week.
Gotcha. I'm going to take Arizona. I like Arizona. I like what they did last week, that they didn't rely on their passing game. I know they made those 2 crazy 3rd and 11s at the end of the game, basically to seal the game, but they didn't rely. Like Fafita didn't throw for 350 yards. McMillan didn't have 250 receiving. That's not how they won that game. So I like what Arizona's doing. It's not that they're not capable of throwing it all over the yard. They didn't have to, and they got physical. And we know that Texas Tech, they want to run the football. And with Todd Brooks, and if they can stop that, which last week they stopped Utah, if they can do that again, this game being at home, I like I like Arizona. And I think I'm seeing it at -5 as of now. I've seen it all the way up to 6. So, but I'm going to take Arizona there. And then that's also the pick of the week is Texas Tech at Arizona. So, Cody, who do you got between Texas Tech and Arizona?
I'm going to go with Arizona. I think this is going to be a shootout. The total is like 64.5, something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Texas Tech's offense is really clicking. You mentioned Taj Brooks. I think he looks like the best running back in the conference. Feels like he's been at Texas Tech for like 7 years too. I'm not concerned about Tech putting up a lot of points. It's kind of the defense that worries me. I think they're giving up, was it like 6.4 yards per play in the past 2 games? And I know Arizona hasn't looked great offensively, but think about who they played these last 2 games, Kansas State and Utah, 2 of the better defenses in the conference. So I like Arizona in this one. I think that, the momentum that they had coming off of last week, going into Utah and beating them, I think that gives them the edge in this one.
Yeah, I'll go Arizona as well. Tech is 4-1, but if you look at how they've gotten there, I would argue that they were outplayed by Cincinnati. I would argue that Arizona State just flat out didn't play a very clean game against them, and Tech beat them by 8. They did smash North Texas, 66-21. They lost to Washington State all the way back in week 2. I think Tech's 4-1 record, if you look at the full context of it, isn't the most impressive 4-1 record on the season. Makes me feel good that Cody's shaking his head, nodding along with me. Makes me feel smart. So I will roll with Arizona in the desert this weekend.
Yeah, you're right about Tech. I mean, heck, you could even say, Alec, that they got outplayed by Abilene Christian as well.
No, that's true. They did get outplayed. They did.
Brutal. So, yeah, I think they'll be able to score some points. I just think Arizona's going to be able to slow them down enough and get enough stops. Both of you are right. It could be a shootout. Should be a shootout. But I think Tech
by that logic,
just not going to have enough.
14-13 going into the fourth quarter.
Oh,
because that's what the Big 12 is now, apparently.
You're right. You're exactly right. It's just every week is something else, man. So it's just insane. So I appreciate you guys taking the time, man, to come and join me again. We thank you here from Big 12 Insiders and everybody out there. Thank you guys again, as always, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.